The humid, forgotten air of a Florida dive bar held the usual symphony of clinking glasses and low conversations. Mark "Brick" Henderson, a mountain of a man with a short fuse and a fading reputation, was having a very bad day. He needed an outlet, and his eyes settled on the unassuming woman at the end of the bar who had just taken the last stool. She was small, quiet, and looked like the easiest target in the room. What he couldn't know was that the calm in her sea-gray eyes wasn't passivity, but the profound stillness of the deepest ocean trench. He didn't see the ghosts of 100 classified missions in the slight set of her shoulders, or the fact that her simple request for a glass of water was the only concession she made to a body that was a living armory. When he shoved her, demanding the seat, he was making the last and greatest mistake of his life. He threw a punch meant to humiliate a stranger, not realizing he had just declared war on a phantom, a legend whispered in secure bunkers across the globe. Senior Chief Lynn's Silent Water Rigs. The bar was a tomb of good intentions and stale beer, a place where the humidity clung to you like a bad memory. Mark "Brick" Henderson sat stewing in his own personal storm cloud. The construction site argument that cost him half a day's pay replayed in his head, each loop making his knuckles whiter on his beer bottle. He was a big man, used to his size clearing a path, used to the subtle flinch people gave him. Tonight, he needed that small victory, that tiny proof he still mattered. His gaze swept the room, a predator looking for the weakest in the herd. He saw her then, a woman perched on the very last bar stool, the one tucked into the corner. She was slight, dressed in worn jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, her dark hair tied back in a simple tail. She wasn't drinking, just sipping water from a tall glass, her eyes scanning the room with a detached, almost analytical calm. To Brick, she looked like nothing. A mouse. An easy win. He lumbered over, the floorboards groaning in protest. He didn't ask. He just planted a meaty hand on the polished wood of the bar next to her glass. "You're in my seat," he grunted, his voice a low rumble. She didn't jump, didn't even turn her head fully. Just a slight tilt, those gray eyes meeting his. There was no fear in them, no anger either. Just a flat, assessing look like she was counting the teeth in his mouth. "It was empty," she said, her voice quieter than he expected, perfectly level. Her calmness was gasoline on his simmering rage. "It was disrespect. It's my seat. Now beat it." He gave her shoulder a hard, dismissive shove. It was like shoving a concrete post. She didn't budge an inch, not a single inch. Her body didn't tense or yield. It just absorbed the push with a shocking, unnatural solidity. The only thing that moved was the water in her glass, sloshing gently. She slowly placed the glass down on a coaster, a deliberate, precise motion. Brick blinked. This wasn't going according to the script where she flinched, apologized, and scurried away. The humiliation of the day, the defiance of this tiny woman, it all coalesced into a red mist. Reason left him. His right fist, a hammer he'd used in brawls and on drywall, clenched. He didn't wind up. He just drove it forward in a short, powerful arc aimed straight at her jaw. A classic sucker punch. It was meant to end the discussion, to restore the natural order. It never landed. What happened next was a blur of terrifying efficiency. Her left hand came up not to block, but to slip past his fist, her forearm redirecting his momentum down and away with a motion so fluid it seemed to lack force entirely. At the same instant, her right hand shot out, not as a fist, but with fingers stiffened, and tapped the side of his ribs right below his armpit. A jolt of lightning, white-hot and paralyzing, exploded through Brick's entire nervous system. His breath left him in a whoosh that wasn't a gasp, but a silent, desperate vacuum. Every muscle from his neck to his knees seized, and then went utterly slack. He didn't fall dramatically. He simply collapsed, folding onto the sticky floor like a marionette with its strings cut. He lay there, conscious but unable to move, his lungs burning for air that wouldn't come, staring up at the water-stained ceiling tiles. The bar had gone dead silent. From his vantage point on the floor, he saw her rise. She didn't look at him. She dropped a $10 bill next to her untouched water glass. As she turned to leave, her shirt rode up slightly at the back, just for a second. Brick's swimming vision caught it, the very top edge of an intricate dark tattoo. It wasn't a dolphin or a rose. It looked like lines, sharp angles, a trident maybe, before the fabric fell back into place. She walked out, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft sigh. The bar remained silent for 3 full heartbeats before the noise rushed back in, louder than before, all pointed at him. The bartender finally came over, not with concern, but with a look of disgust. "You okay, buddy? You just got dropped by a girl half your size." The laughter that followed was the most painful sound Brick had ever heard. He could finally draw a ragged breath, but the real agony was just beginning. For 3 days, Brick was a prisoner in his own aching body and crumbling mind. The ache in his ribs where she'd tapped him was a deep, purple bruise that felt like it went to the bone. But worse was the shame. It was a physical weight, heavier than any load of cinder blocks. He couldn't sleep. The moment played on a loop. The shove, the calm look, the tap, the floor. Who was she? The memory of the tattoo gnawed at him. It wasn't club ink. It had a stark, official look. On the 4th day, limping and feeling hollow, he went to the only person he knew who'd been in the military, an old buddy named Dave who'd served a stint in the Army years ago. Dave ran a muffler shop now. Brick didn't tell the whole story, just mumbled about a tough woman with a weird tattoo, showing the trident shape he'd poorly sketched on a napkin. Dave went very still. He looked from a napkin to Brick's haunted eyes, then down to the bruise just visible under Brick's t-shirt. "Brick," Dave said, his voice low and serious, a tone Brick had never heard from him before. "You didn't pick a fight with her, did you?" Brick's silence was answer enough. Dave let out a long whistle. "That's not an Army tattoo. That's not even regular Navy. That's the Budweiser." "The what?" "The SEAL trident. The eagle, anchor, and flintlock pistol. It's their badge. You only get it if you survive Hell Week and the whole damn training pipeline. It's not something you get for a weekend canoe trip." Dave leaned closer, his face grim. "And the way she put you down? A pressure point strike to the brachial plexus? That's not basic training. That's high-level stuff. The quiet ones, man, especially the women who make it through that. They're not just tough. They're ghosts. Legends with a file instead of a fan club." The word SEAL landed in Brick's gut like a block of ice. He'd seen movies. He had a vague Hollywood idea of what that meant. Super soldiers, shadows, the stuff of whispered myths. And he had tried to punch one over a bar stool. The reality of what he'd done, the catastrophic scale of his mistake, began to truly dawn on him. He hadn't just been beaten. He had blindly challenged a force of nature. The need to understand, to somehow make it right in his own head, became an obsession. Dave, reluctantly, knew a guy who knew a guy, a retired Navy investigator named Calvin, who lived up the coast. It took a week of pleading and a case of beer to get a meeting. Calvin's house was neat, nondescript. The man himself was in his 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Brick, sweating and humbled, told the whole story, leaving nothing out. Calvin listened in stone-faced silence. When Brick finished, Calvin stood, walked to a bookshelf, and pulled down a thick plain binder. He didn't open it. "You're lucky you're breathing," Calvin said flatly. "What you're describing, the economy of motion, the targeted strike, that's not just a SEAL. That's a master close-quarters combat instructor. There are only a handful who are that precise." He paused, weighing something. "The woman you're talking about, her name would be Riggs. Senior Chief Lynn Riggs. Call sign Silent Water. Her service record is 90% blacked out. The unredacted bits are the stuff we tell new guys about to scare them straight. Did 5 tours no one could talk about. Helped develop the hand-to-hand curriculum they use now. They say she could disarm a man twice her size with a pen and a napkin. And you took a swing at her." Brick felt the world tilt. A name. She had a name. And a history that sounded less like a resume and more like a dark fairy tale. I need to apologize," he stammered, the words feeling absurdly small. Calvin actually laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Apologize? Son, the best thing you can do is forget you ever saw her. People like her, they leave the service, but the service never leaves them. They crave normal, a quiet life. And you, in your stupidity, violated that. You think you're the first drunk idiot to try her? You're just the one who lived to tell the tale without a hospital visit. Go home, be thankful, and never, ever go back to that bar. Brick tried to take Calvin's advice. He really did. For a month, he went to work, came home, and stared at the wall. But the shame didn't fade, it mutated. It wasn't just about being beaten anymore. It was about the profound wrongness of it all. He had tried to inflict his bad day on a complete stranger, a woman who had, he now knew, likely borne burdens he couldn't even imagine. His violence had been petty, born of temper. Hers had been a restrained, clinical response to a threat. The difference was a canyon he couldn't ignore. He had to try, not to clear his name, but to acknowledge the wrong, to show he understood, even a little. He started going to the dive bar again, not to drink, but to sit at a different stool, nursing a single soda. He asked the bartender, carefully, if he'd seen her. The bartender just shook his head. Haven't seen her since that night. You should let it go, man. But Brick couldn't. He began frequenting the areas nearby, the library, the grocery store, the running trail by the bay. He wasn't stalking. He was waiting for a chance, a moment where he could approach safely, in daylight, in public. He practiced what he would say 1,000 times in his head. It always sounded stupid. The chance came on a cool, overcast morning 8 weeks later. He was walking through the small, sandy city park that overlooked the water. And there she was, sitting on a bench, dressed in running gear, looking out at the gray waves. She was so still she could have been part of the landscape. His heart hammered against his ribs, the old bruise giving a phantom throb. Every instinct screamed to run. He took a deep breath and walked forward, making sure his footsteps were loud on the gravel path. He stopped a good 10 feet away, well out of arm's reach. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough. She turned her head. The gray eyes were the same. The calm was the same. There was no flicker of recognition, just a patient, blank slate. "My name is Mark Henderson," he began, his words tumbling out in a rush. "2 months ago, at the bar called the Rusty Anchor, I shoved you. I threw a punch at you. It was the most ignorant, shameful thing I've ever done." A slight, almost imperceptible shift in her posture. The blankness focused into a quiet attention. He pressed on. "I found out. I talked to someone about who you are. What you are. I don't mean to intrude. I needed you to know that I know, that I understand the scale of what I did. I attacked a legend over a bar stool. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed to stand here and say I'm sorry, to your face, so you know that I know how wrong it was." He fell silent, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. He felt utterly exposed. Lynn Riggs studied him for a long moment. The wind off the water ruffled her hair. She wasn't sizing him up as a threat this time. She was assessing his words, his posture, the raw sincerity in his trembling voice. "Thank you for the apology, Mark Henderson," she said finally. Her voice was still quiet, but it had a different quality now, less like a flat line, more like a calm sea after a storm. "Most don't bother. They just nurse their pride and their bruises." He nodded, not knowing what to say. "You call me a legend," she said, a flicker of something, sadness, weariness, in her eyes. "Legends are for storybooks. I was just a sailor who did a job that required being ready for men like the one you were that night. The man you are right now, standing here, he's not that guy." She stood up. Brick instinctively took half a step back. She didn't move toward him. She just gave him a single, slow nod. It wasn't a nod of forgiveness, exactly. It was an acknowledgement, a receipt for his apology, a closing of the ledger. "The best way to be sorry," she said, turning to look back at the ocean, "is to never be that guy again. For anyone." She started to walk away, down the path along the shore. Then she paused, glanced back over her shoulder. "And Henderson, you got a decent left hook. Terrible form, but decent power. If you ever want to learn how to actually use it, the community center has a boxing gym. Tuesdays and Thursdays." Then she was gone, melting into the gray morning, a ghost once more. Brick stood on the path for a long time, the salt air filling his lungs. The crushing weight was gone. In its place was a hollow space, ready to be filled with something new. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had caused so much stupid trouble. That Tuesday, he found himself outside the community center, listening to the sounds of skipping ropes and pounding bags from within. He took a deep breath and walked inside.